A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Ashes and Silence. The Night Castle. Silvercrest fell. The world of a 7-year-old girl ended not with a scream, but with a stolen breath. Flames leaped hungrily across the timbers overhead, clawing at banners that had once shone silver and blue above feast tables and candlelit corridors. Wolf howls echoed beyond shattered walls as men and beasts fought side by side in the darkness, snarls punctuated by the clash of steel and the sickening sharpness of final violence. Willa pressed her fist to her mouth to hold in whimpers as she cowered beneath a slanted beam, the taste of ash on her tongue. The scent of blood pricked her nose before she saw it. Her father's fallen body sprawled in the main hall entrance, sword still slick in his hand. A gash crossing the family sigil at his chest. Firelight danced along the memory. Too bright for her eyes, too cruel to be forgotten. Before her knees could buckle beneath her, arms coiled around her waist, and she was folded inside a thick cloak, whose lining smelled of old leather and distant frost. Lord Oswin Hartley whispered, "You must be brave. Your parents are gone." He did not weep with her. He did not promise safety. Instead, he pressed her close and guided her through smoldering corridors, the ruins of her house collapsing behind. The next day, the world was cold, quiet, unfamiliar. Faces surrounded Willa. New ones, hard ones. Lady Beatrix Hartley, pale and sharp, eyed her up and down. "She'll need to be silenced," she declared in the clipped voice she'd used to dismiss a maid with a wrinkled apron. Willa, shivering, drank the potion without protest, trusting naive hope that kindness lay on the other side of bitterness. It scalded her throat to the core. The pain stole her voice clean away, slicing every sound from her tongue. When she tried to speak, not even a rasp emerged. The years blurred, one servant's day blending into another. Willa learned to read from glances, ran errands wordlessly, and bore every bruise and admonishment in silence. She cleaned hearths, washed tunics, and served at Hartley tables, shrinking her world to the width of hallways and the quick judgments of people who never asked her name. The whip's stripes faded, replaced by the habit of keeping her eyes on the ground, her thoughts locked tight within. 15 years made her hands deft and her presence nearly invisible. She could sense moods in the air, when tempers flared, when secrets passed along hidden corridors. She grew tall, but never sturdy. Her hair darkened to a near black, tied always in a knot that kept it out of her eyes. Only her eyes, green as forest moss under rain, dared reflect back the world's sharpness. She knew to expect little, to want even less. Then, on a morning as brittle cold as any before, the castle erupted with the kind of thrill that usually spelled disaster for those who toiled in shadow. "The Alpha King rides today," servants muttered, glancing over shoulders. "He comes for the great hunt." Willa listened as the whispers grew, some tinged with awe, others with unease. No one crosses him and lives. Wolf King. Storm-blooded, they say. Willa kept her thoughts to herself as she swept stone floors cleaved by centuries of hurried boots. Her world revolved around Lady Beatrix's clipped commands. "Willa, polish the pavilion tableware. Willa, see the main tent is swept for the king's meal. Spill so much as a drop and I'll have your hide." She nodded, silent as rain on slate rooftops. The great hall became a hive of relentless labor. Men arrived with silver-plated horns and tartan banners, the scent of oiled leather and wolf musk clinging to their cloaks. Outside, pavilions sprang up, a sea of deep blue and silver fabric, twisting like rivers against green lawns. Willa moved among carts and barrels, hauling and stacking beside other servants who never expected her to talk back. That afternoon, as she placed knives alongside waiting trenchers in the Alpha King's pavilion, her gaze flickered up in fleeting curiosity. The men assigned to the central table were taller than any she'd ever seen, their faces marked by old scars, their eyes flinty, unreadable. One bore the wolf's head of Stormhaven on his cloak pin. Another's golden stare lingered, not with suspicion, but with a kind of weighing curiosity that radiated not just power, but calculation. He did not look at her because she was beautiful. She knew she was not. He looked as if measuring her silence. Their leader arrived last, dismounting with a presence that made the air feel charged. Rydian Stormborn was the figure who haunted the kingdom's bedtime stories, beard a dark shadow streaked with silver at the jaw, hair wind-tossed and glossy. His skin was the pale white of winter moonlight, his eyes so bright and gold they caught torchlight like twin coins. He strode without hesitation, shoulders straight, every movement controlled, yet carrying the threat of unleashed ferocity. Willa watched from her peripheral vision, never risking more. The feast that followed would pass into rumor for years. Dishes poured like a river down the center of the high table, wine goblets filled and emptied, laughter turning raw and fierce as old alliances and rivalries spiked. Lady Beatrix wore her best smile, but Willa saw how her knuckles whitened on her jeweled goblet whenever the Alpha King met her gaze. Serving among the clamor, Willa fumbled once, just once, wine splattering across white linen as she dodged the sudden, careless gesture of a noble's sleeve. The world froze. Conversation dropped. Heads turned. "Clumsy," snapped the noblewoman, her lip curled. Willa jolted, heart pounding in her throat, cloth already out to blot the mess. She awaited the slap that often followed, or Beatrix's hiss from across the table, but neither came. Instead, a voice that seemed to crack like thunder spoke from the dais. "Let it be," Rydian said, without rising or raising his voice. The noblewoman blanched as if stung. "Yes, Your Majesty." Willa absorbed the moment. His eyes brushed hers, not dismissing or derisive, but calm and almost searching. He did not linger. The weight of the threat dissipated, talk resumed, and the humiliation faded into the clamor of cutlery and song. Later that night, as she slid into the straw pallet in her tiny, drafty room beneath the stairs, Willa pressed her hand to her ribcage, feeling the steady beat there. She wondered what it meant when the Alpha King bothered to speak for a servant, and why her fingers shook less remembering his voice than they did cleaning the spilled wine. The moon's pale glow slipped through the arrow slits, touching the scar that marred her throat, a keepsake of violence and forced obedience. If she closed her eyes, she could almost remember a time before silence, when her name had meant something beyond disgrace. Beneath that same moon, the Alpha King paced the great hall's gallery, his mind already lingering on the girl in gray, the one who listened better than most men spoke. But for Willa, the only truth that mattered was this. She had survived another day hidden in the shadows, her voice a prisoner to old poison. Neither of them knew the next sunrise would bring a hunt and a choice, capable of burning the world clean again. Chapter 2. The Arrow's Flight. Dawn crept over Hartley Keep with the kind of pale light that promised neither warmth nor comfort. The air tasted sharp, carrying the scent of wet earth and pine needles crushed beneath countless boots. Willa woke before the bells, her body attuned to the rhythms of servitude, every muscle already anticipating the labor ahead. The great hunt was not merely sport. It was spectacle, tradition, and a display of dominance wrapped in silk banners and sharpened steel. Lords and warriors from across the kingdom would ride together, testing prowess and forging fragile alliances beneath the watchful gaze of the Alpha King. For servants like Willa, it meant hauling supplies through forests, setting up pavilions in clearings, and staying invisible while powerful men decided the fates of lesser wolves. Marin found her in the kitchens before the sun had fully risen, shoving a leather satchel into her arms. "Supplies for the hunting camp," the girl whispered, glancing nervously toward the courtyard where horses stamped and snorted. "Beatrix wants you with the rear guard. Carry water, bandages, and wine. Stay out of sight unless called." Willa nodded, slinging the heavy bag across her shoulder, the weight pressed against bruises still healing from the last lashing, but she had learned to ignore such discomforts. Pain was a companion she knew too well to fear anymore. Outside, the courtyard churned with controlled chaos. Warriors adjusted saddles and checked sword belts, their breaths misting in the cold morning air. Horses tossed manes and pawed at cobblestones, sensing the anticipation that crackled through their riders. Willa threaded between them, head down, making herself small. The Alpha King stood near the gate, speaking quietly with a scarred warrior whose face bore the marks of old battles. Rydian wore dark leather reinforced with steel plates at the shoulders, practical armor that spoke of a man who expected to fight rather than merely watch. His black warhorse stood beside him, calm and steady beneath his master's hand. Even from a distance, Willa could feel the weight of his presence, not oppressive, but unavoidable, like the pull of a tide. She did not linger. To stare was to invite attention, and attention brought consequences. The hunting party rode out as the sun broke free of the horizon, a river of horses and hounds flowing toward the dense forest that bordered Hartley lands. Willa followed on foot with the other servants, trudging through dew-soaked grass and muddy trails. The satchel dug into her shoulder, but she shifted the weight and kept pace. The forest swallowed them whole. Ancient oaks and towering pines blocked out the sky, their canopy so thick that even midday felt like twilight. Birdsong echoed strangely here, distorted by moss-draped branches and the hollow spaces between roots. Willa had always felt more at ease in forests than in castles. Here, at least, the silence was natural rather than enforced. The hunting party split into smaller groups, fanning out to cover more ground. Willa was assigned to follow Lord Hartley's contingent, staying far behind the mounted warriors but close enough to respond if summoned. She moved carefully, avoiding roots and fallen branches, her senses attuned to every rustle and snap in the underbrush. Hours passed in a blur of green shadows and distant shouts. Occasionally, a horn would sound, signaling a successful kill or a regrouping. Willa paused once to refill water skins from a cold stream, kneeling beside the clear water and splashing her face to chase away exhaustion. It was then that she noticed them. Shadows moved wrong in the trees ahead, too deliberate, too careful. Willa froze, water dripping from her cupped hands. Her eyes tracked the movement, piecing together shapes that did not belong. Men, hidden among the branches, bows drawn and arrows nocked. Their clothing was dark, blending seamlessly with bark and shadow. They were not hunters. They were predators. Her heart kicked hard against her ribs. She could not shout a warning. Her voice was a ghost, useless as smoke, but her body could move. Willa dropped the water skin and ran. Branches whipped at her face and arms as she crashed through the undergrowth, abandoning stealth for speed. The hunting party was ahead. She could hear horses and voices, close but not close enough. Her lungs burned, legs screaming protest, but she pushed harder. The Alpha King rode at the front of the group, his posture relaxed but alert. He did not see the archer step into position, bow drawn, arrow aimed directly at his back. The arrowhead gleamed black in the filtered light, silver coated in something darker, something that reeked of poison even from a distance. Willa did not think. Thought would have stopped her, reminded her that she was nothing, that her life held no value compared to a king's. But instinct overrode reason. She threw herself forward, legs coiling and launching her into the space between the archer's aim and Rydian's exposed back. The arrow struck her left shoulder with a force that stole her breath. Pain exploded white-hot and blinding, radiating outward like lightning through water. She gasped silently, mouth open in a scream that had no sound, and crumpled to the forest floor. Chaos erupted. Horses reared and warriors shouted, swords hissing free of scabbards. The archer vanished into the trees, swallowed by shadow and undergrowth before anyone could give chase. Boots pounded past Willa's head, voices overlapping in confusion and fury. Then hands, strong and careful, lifted her from the dirt. She blinked through tears of agony and saw golden eyes staring down at her, wide with shock and something else she could not name. "Hold still," Rydian commanded, though his voice was gentler than she expected. He cradled her against his chest as he barked orders to his men. "Find that bastard. Search every tree, every shadow. I want him alive." Warriors scattered, hounds baying as they picked up the scent. But Willa barely registered any of it. The poison was spreading, a cold fire crawling through her veins. Her vision blurred at the edges, the world tilting sideways. She tried to speak, to explain, to apologize for her presumption, but her throat produced nothing. Rydian's face hovered above hers, his expression carved from stone and fury. His hand pressed against the wound, trying to stem the bleeding, but the poison was faster. She could feel her heartbeat slowing, each pulse weaker than the last. "You saved my life," he said. and there was wonder in his voice, raw and unguarded. "Why would you do that?" Willa wanted to answer. She wanted to tell him that she did not know, that her body moved before her mind caught up, that perhaps some part of her recognized something in him that called to the broken, silent thing she had become. But darkness was closing in, pulling her down into cold depths. Rydian's jaw clenched. She saw the decision flash across his face. Reckless, desperate, irreversible. He lowered his head to the base of her neck, where pulse fluttered weakly beneath skin. His breath was hot against her throat. "Forgive me," he whispered. Then his teeth sank deep. The pain was different this time, sharp and claiming, burning away the cold poison with a heat that felt almost sacred. Willa's back arched involuntarily, every nerve alight as something ancient and powerful flooded through her. It was not just his strength flowing into her veins. It was connection, recognition, a bond forged in desperation and sealed with blood. Her wolf, dormant for so long it felt like a dream, stirred. Deep in her chest, something cracked, not breaking, but hatching, unfurling wings that had been folded for 15 years. The muting spell that had choked her voice began to fracture, threads of magic snapping one by one beneath the overwhelming force of an alpha's claim. Rydian pulled back, blood on his lips, eyes blazing gold. He pressed his forehead to hers, breathing hard. "Stay with me," he commanded, and this time it was not a request, but an order backed by the full weight of his authority. "You will not die. Do you understand? You will not die." Willa's vision swam, consciousness slipping like sand through fingers. The last thing she registered was the feeling of being lifted, cradled against a chest that smelled of forest and steel, and something wild that her newly waking wolf recognized as safety. Then the world went black. When the darkness finally receded, it did so slowly, reluctantly. Willa surfaced from unconsciousness like a drowning woman breaking through water, gasping for air that burned her lungs. Her body felt wrong, too heavy and too light at the same time, every nerve ending raw and oversensitive. Voices murmured nearby, low and urgent. The poison should have killed her within minutes. How is she still breathing? The Alpha King's mark. He forced a mate bond. His strength is keeping her alive. But she is no one, a servant. Why would he risk silence? He did what he had to do. Willa tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt weighted with stones. Her throat ached, not from the old muting curse, but from something new, a burning sensation that felt almost like healing. She became aware of warmth surrounding her, soft fabric against skin, the scent of clean linen and herbs. Slowly, painfully, she forced her eyes open. The room was unfamiliar. Stone walls hung with rich tapestries, a fire crackling in a massive hearth, candles casting dancing shadows across vaulted ceilings. This was not the servants' quarters. This was somewhere far above her station, somewhere she had no right to be. Movement drew her gaze. Rydian stood by the window, silhouetted against pale morning light. He wore no armor now, just a simple tunic that did nothing to diminish the power coiled in his frame. When he turned and saw her awake, something shifted in his expression. Relief, perhaps, or something more complicated. "You are alive," he said, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to her level, and studied her face with an intensity that made her want to shrink away. "How do you feel?" Willa opened her mouth to gesture, to indicate that she could not speak, that she had never been able to speak, and a sound emerged. It was rough, barely more than a rasp, but it was undeniably a voice. Her voice. She croaked, and the word tasted like freedom and terror in equal measure. Rydian's eyes widened. "The curse," he breathed. "It is breaking." Willa's hand flew to her throat, fingers trembling as they touched the place where his teeth had pierced skin. The mark was there, raised and tender, burning with a heat that had nothing to do with fever. Through that connection, she could feel him, not his thoughts exactly, but his presence, solid and unwavering, an anchor in a storm she did not yet understand. "What did you do?" she managed. each word scraping past her damaged throat. Rydian's expression was unreadable. "I claimed you," he said simply. "Created a mate bond to share my strength and fight the poison. It was the only way to save your life." The implications crashed over her like cold water. Mate bond. The words carried weight in shifter culture, significance that even she, raised in servitude, understood. It was not marriage. It was something deeper, more primal, binding wolves together at a level that transcended choice or law. "I did not ask for this," she whispered. "I know." His jaw tightened. "But you threw yourself in front of an arrow meant for me. You gave your life without hesitation. I could do no less." Silence stretched between them, heavy with questions neither knew how to ask. Finally, Willa forced herself to meet his golden gaze. "The archer escaped?" Rydian's expression darkened. "For now, but we will find him. This was not a random attack. Someone wants me dead, and they were willing to use poisoned arrows to ensure it." He paused, studying her. "You saw them before anyone else did. How?" Willa struggled to find words. "I was refilling water. They moved wrong. Too careful. I knew they did not belong. And you ran straight toward danger to warn me." I could not shout. The admission tasted bitter. "Running was all I had." Rydian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of dark hair from her face. His touch was surprisingly gentle for hands that could kill without hesitation. "You have a voice now," he said quietly. "Thanks to the bond. The curse that silenced you is breaking under the force of my claim. In a few days, you will be able to speak freely." Hope and fear tangled in Willa's chest. After 15 years of silence, the prospect of speech felt both miraculous and terrifying. What would she say? Who would she become when she could finally speak her truth? "Rest now," Rydian said, rising to his feet. "You have been unconscious for 3 days. Your body needs time to adjust to the changes." 3 days. The world had shifted on its axis while she slept, and she had no idea what awaited her on the other side of this door. But as Rydian left, pausing only to glance back at her with an expression she could not decipher, Willa understood one thing with absolute clarity. Nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 3. Awakening. Willa woke to the sound of voices murmuring just beyond the chamber door. Her body felt strange, as though she had been disassembled and put back together with pieces that did not quite fit. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft, filled with down that cradled her aching limbs. Silk sheets whispered against her skin, a luxury so foreign it made her want to retreat back into unconsciousness. But consciousness would not release her. It dragged her upward, insistent and unrelenting, until she forced her eyes open. The room was vast, far larger than any space she had ever occupied. Tapestries depicting wolves racing beneath moonlit skies hung from stone walls. A fire crackled in a hearth tall enough for a man to stand inside. Candles burned in silver sconces, their light dancing across vaulted ceilings carved with intricate patterns. This was Castle Stormhaven, she realized. The Alpha King's seat of power. And she, a voiceless servant who had spent 15 years sleeping on straw pallets, now lay in a bed that could have housed 3 people comfortably. The door opened, admitting a woman whose presence filled the space with quiet authority. She was older, perhaps 50, with silver-streaked brown hair pulled into a severe knot. Her dress was simple but well-made, the mark of someone who served the highest echelons of power. When her eyes, sharp and gray as winter storms, landed on Willa, they softened with something that might have been sympathy. "You are awake," the woman said, crossing the room with measured steps. "I am Counselor Edith, counselor to His Majesty. I have been tasked with your care and instruction." Willa pushed herself upright, wincing as her shoulder protested. The wound had healed with unnatural speed, leaving only tender pink skin where the arrow had pierced. She touched it gingerly, feeling the mark beneath, Rydian's claiming bite, still burning with residual heat. "Instruction?" Willa's voice emerged rough and uncertain, each word requiring conscious effort. Speaking felt like using a muscle that had atrophied, awkward and strange. Edith settled into a chair beside the bed, her movements deliberate. "The Alpha King believes you are not who you appear to be. a servant girl who cannot speak, who has lived in obscurity for 15 years. But the mate bond has revealed certain truths. Willa's throat tightened. What truths? You are shifter born, Edith said simply. Not human, as you were led to believe. The bond awakened your wolf, and with it, broke the muting curse that had been placed upon you. His Majesty wishes to understand who you truly are and why you were cursed. The words settled over Willa like snow, cold and inescapable. Shifter born. She had always known something was missing. Some essential piece of herself locked away beyond reach. But to hear it spoken aloud made it real in a way that terrified her. I do not remember, she whispered. My childhood is mostly shadows and fire. I was 7 when Castle Silvercrest fell. Lord Hartley saved me, or so I was told. Lady Beatrix silenced me to protect me from those who had killed my family. That is all I know. Edith's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or calculation. Silvercrest, she repeated as though tasting the name. That pack was massacred 15 years ago. The bloodline was believed extinct. Perhaps it is, Willa said bitterly. I am no one, a broken girl who cannot even remember her parents' faces. You are more than you know, Edith countered. And the Alpha King intends to help you discover exactly who you are. But first, you must learn to speak properly, to carry yourself as befits your true station, and to understand the world you have been kept from. Willa stared at her hands, calloused and scarred from years of labor. I am a servant. That is my station. You were a prisoner, Edith corrected gently. There is a difference. Over the following days, Willa's world expanded in ways that left her reeling. Edith proved to be a patient but exacting teacher, drilling her on pronunciation and enunciation until Willa's throat ached from the effort. They worked on posture, how to stand without hunching, how to walk without apologizing for taking up space. Edith taught her the complex hierarchy of shifter society, the roles of alphas and betas and omegas, the intricate web of pack politics that governed the kingdom. Omegas are rare, Edith explained one afternoon as they sat in a sunlit chamber overlooking the castle grounds. They possess abilities that others do not, the power to soothe aggression, to heal minor wounds, to sense loyalty and deception. They are treasured and protected, never silenced and hidden away. Willa absorbed the information with growing unease. If she was truly Omega, it made her silence even more unnatural, her servitude even more cruel. But it was the evenings that tested her most. Rydian visited each night, his presence filling the chamber with barely contained power. He never stayed long, never touched her beyond the occasional brush of fingers against her wrist to check her pulse. But the mate bond hummed between them, a constant awareness that made her hyper-conscious of every breath he took, every shift of his weight. Tell me about your life at Hartley Keep, he said one evening, settling into the chair Edith usually occupied. He had shed his armor for a simple tunic, but authority clung to him regardless. Willa chose her words carefully. I woke before dawn, worked until after dark. I carried water, scrubbed floors, served at table. I was not mistreated beyond what was considered normal discipline. His jaw tightened. Normal discipline. Lady Beatrix used the whip sparingly, Willa said, though the words tasted like ash. Only when I made mistakes or drew too much attention. She said it was for my own good, to keep me safe. Safe, Rydian repeated, and the word dripped with controlled fury. You were a child when you came to them. 7 years old and traumatized by massacre. They should have protected you, not enslaved you. Willa had no response to that. She had never allowed herself to question her circumstances before. Survival required accepting what could not be changed. I need to know everything you remember about your childhood, Rydian continued. Every detail, no matter how small. The curse that silenced you was powerful magic, deliberately applied. Someone wanted to ensure you could never speak of what you knew. But I remember almost nothing, Willa protested. Just fire and screaming and Lord Hartley carrying me away. Then we will start there. Rydian leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. Tell me about Lord Hartley. How did he treat you? Willa closed her eyes, reaching for memories that felt more like fever dreams. He was distant, I rarely saw him after the first few months. Lady Beatrix managed the household, and I was hers to command. But once, when I was perhaps 10, I overheard him speaking with someone in his study. They were discussing lands, Silvercrest lands, how they had been divided after the massacre. Ridian's eyes sharpened. What else did you hear? That maintaining me was insurance, in case anyone ever questioned the legitimacy of the territorial claims. As long as I lived, mute and broken, I was proof that the Silvercrest line had ended in tragedy, not treachery. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Willa opened her eyes to find Ridian staring at her, with an intensity that made her want to look away. They kept you alive as evidence, he said slowly. A living monument to their theft, and they cursed you to ensure you could never testify against them. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Willa had always been a tool, never a person. Her suffering had served a purpose, and that purpose was protecting the men who had destroyed her family. I want you to see something, Ridian said, rising to his feet. He crossed to a tall mirror mounted on the wall, not a normal mirror, but one whose surface shimmered with faint magical light. This is an enchanted glass. It shows a shifter their true form, the wolf that lives within. Most see their wolf for the first time during their first shift, but you have not shifted yet. The curse kept that part of you locked away. Willa approached the mirror slowly, heart hammering against her ribs. Her reflection stared back. Thin face, dark hair, green eyes wide with apprehension. Nothing remarkable, nothing special. Touch the glass, Ridian instructed. Let it show you what you are. She pressed her palm to the cool surface. Magic thrummed through her fingers, traveling up her arm and sinking deep into her chest, where her wolf had begun to stir. The reflection rippled, then changed. The woman in the mirror remained, but superimposed over her human form was something else entirely. A wolf with fur the color of moonlight, silver so pure it seemed to glow. Its eyes were the same green as hers, bright and intelligent. White markings traced its legs and chest, forming patterns that looked almost deliberate. Willa's breath caught. What is this? Your wolf, Ridian said softly. He stood behind her, his reflection towering over hers. And unless I am very mistaken, that coloring belongs to only one bloodline. He did not need to say the name. She saw it in his face, in the way his expression shifted from curiosity to something more complicated. Respect, perhaps, or wariness. Silvercrest, she whispered. The silver wolf and the moon entwined. Her family's crest had depicted wolves exactly this color. You are not just a survivor of the massacre, Ridian said. You are the true heir to Silvercrest lands and title, and Lord Hartley has known this the entire time. The revelation should have felt like vindication, like justice finally arriving after 15 years of silence. Instead, it felt like a burden settling onto shoulders already bent beneath too much weight. What does it mean? Willa asked, still staring at her wolf's reflection. If I am heir to a dead pack, it means you have a claim to lands that were illegally seized, Ridian said. It means Lord Hartley and his allies committed treason when they participated in your family's murder and subsequent cover-up. And it means you are in grave danger if they discover you are no longer mute and broken. Willa turned away from the mirror, unable to look at the wolf she did not know how to be. You said you would not reveal what you know. Not yet. Not until we understand the full scope of the conspiracy, Ridian agreed. The attack in the forest was meant to kill me. The archer escaped, but the arrow he used was coated in poison specifically designed to kill shifters. Someone with resources and knowledge planned that assassination. I need to know if it connects to your family's massacre. You think Lord Hartley ordered the attack? I think Lord Hartley has motive and opportunity, Ridian said carefully. But I will not accuse without evidence. That is why I need your help. You lived in his household for 15 years. You saw and heard things that others did not. Your perspective is invaluable. Willa sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion washing over her. I do not know how to be anyone other than what I have always been. A servant who keeps her head down and survives. Ridian knelt before her, bringing himself to her eye level. The mate bond thrummed between them, warm and insistent. You are not alone in this. I will help you reclaim what was stolen. But you must trust me. Trust. The word felt foreign, dangerous. Trust had gotten her family killed. Trust had led her into servitude. But as she met Rydian's golden eyes and felt the steady certainty of the bond connecting them, she realized she had little choice. I will try, she said finally. He smiled then, a small expression that transformed his severe features into something almost gentle. That is all I ask. After he left, Willa sat alone in the vast chamber, staring at her hands. They were the same hands that had scrubbed floors and carried water, but now they belonged to someone else entirely. Someone with a name and a bloodline and a claim to power she did not understand. The silver wolf in the mirror had looked at her with eyes that knew things she did not. Secrets locked away by trauma and curse, waiting to be uncovered. Willa touched the claiming mark on her neck, feeling the heat of it pulse in time with her heartbeat. She was bound now to a king who saw her as more than a broken servant, but she did not yet know if that binding was salvation or simply another cage. Outside, the moon rose over Castle Stormhaven, painting the world in silver light. And somewhere in the darkness, enemies watched and waited, unaware that the girl they had tried to erase was beginning to remember who she truly was. Chapter 4. Threads of Conspiracy. The days that followed Willa's awakening settled into a rhythm both strange and fragile. Each morning, Counselor Edith arrived with lessons that stretched beyond mere etiquette. She taught Willa to read the subtle hierarchies in a room full of wolves, how to identify a beta's deference versus an alpha's challenge, the nuances of pack law that governed everything from territorial disputes to mating rights. Your silence gave you an advantage you did not recognize, Edith said one afternoon, her fingers steepled beneath her chin as they sat in the library overlooking Castle Stormhaven's eastern gardens. You learned to observe without being observed. That skill will serve you well in the games ahead. Games, Willa repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. Is that what this is? Politics is always a game, Edith replied without hesitation. The stakes are simply higher when the players can tear out each other's throats. It was during these lessons that Rydian began to involve Willa in his investigation. He did not summon her to formal councils or parade her before his advisors. Instead, he came to her chambers in the evenings when shadows grew long and conversations could be kept private. Tell me what you remember about the servants at Hartley Keep, he said one night, settling into the chair that had become his customary seat. Not the nobles, not the warriors. The people who cleaned and cooked and listened without being heard. Willa closed her eyes, reaching for memories she had tried to bury. There was Marin in the kitchens. She was kind when kindness was dangerous. And old Willem, the groundskeeper. He used to mutter about how the southern fields had once belonged to different lords before the Hartleys claimed them. Different lords, Rydian prompted. Did he say which ones? Silvercrest, Willa admitted. He said the soil there still remembered the old pack's blessing, that crops grew stronger because wolves had run those fields for centuries. Rydian leaned forward, his expression intent. What else did Willem say? That Lord Hartley came into those lands through marriage first and violence second. That his wife's family had territorial connections to the Silvercrest borders, and when the massacre happened, the Crown granted the unclaimed lands to those who could prove adjacent holdings. Adjacent holdings seized through convenient tragedy, Rydian murmured, and a 7-year-old heir kept alive but silenced to prevent any future challenges to those claims. Willa opened her eyes, meeting his golden gaze. You believe Lord Hartley was involved in my family's murder. I believe Lord Hartley had motive, means, and opportunity, Rydian corrected. But belief is not proof. That is why I need your help. You lived in his house for 15 years. You saw patterns, overheard conversations, noticed things that seemed insignificant at the time. Together we can reconstruct what truly happened that night. It was painstaking work. Willa dredged up fragments of memories, a conversation overheard through a keyhole, a visitor who arrived cloaked and left hurriedly, ledgers she had glimpsed while cleaning that showed payments to mercenaries in the weeks before the massacre. Each piece was small, potentially meaningless on its own, but Rydian possessed a mind that wove disparate threads into coherent patterns. The attack on me was not random. he said after one particularly long evening of piecing together timelines. The archer used silver-coated and aconite poison, a combination specifically designed to kill shifters quickly and painfully. That poison is expensive and difficult to obtain. Only someone with significant resources and connections could have acquired it. Lord Hartley is wealthy, Willa said slowly. But so are many lords. True. But how many lords had reason to want me dead specifically? Willa considered the question. You are investigating the Silvercrest massacre. If you discovered evidence of Hartley's involvement, you could strip him of his titles and lands. You could execute him for treason. Exactly. Rydian's smile was grim. And if the archer had succeeded, the investigation would have died with me. My heir is my younger cousin, a competent ruler, but one who has shown little interest in old territorial disputes. Lord Hartley would have been safe. But the archer escaped, Willa said. You have no proof of who hired him. The archer was found dead in his cell 2 days after the attack, Rydian said quietly. Poisoned. The same poison that was on the arrow meant for me. The revelation sent ice through Willa's veins. Someone silenced him before he could be questioned. Someone with access to the castle dungeons and knowledge of how to bypass my guards. Rydian's expression darkened. Which means the conspiracy extends into my own court. It was then that Willa understood the true scope of the danger. This was not simply about avenging her family or reclaiming stolen lands. This was about rooting out corruption that had infected the highest levels of the kingdom's power structure. Who had access to the dungeons? She asked. Any member of the High Council, my personal guard, and a handful of trusted servants. Rydian stood, pacing to the window. I have narrowed the list of suspects, but I cannot move against them without proof. If I accuse without evidence, I risk civil war. Willa rose from her seat, crossing to stand beside him. The mate bond hummed between them, warm and steady, an anchor in the storm of political machinations. What do you need me to do? She asked. He turned to face her, and for a moment, his careful control slipped. She saw the weight he carried, the responsibility of an entire kingdom resting on shoulders that were broad but not invincible. I need you to remember, he said simply. Every detail, every conversation, every face that visited Hartley Keep in the years before the massacre. Somewhere in your memories is a connection we have not yet found. So Willa remembered. She sat with Edith during the day, learning to speak and move and think like the heir she had never been allowed to become. And she sat with Rydian during the evenings, excavating her past for fragments of truth buried beneath 15 years of survival. It was during one of these sessions that she recalled something significant. There was a man, she said slowly, fingers pressed to her temples as she chased the memory. He visited Lord Hartley perhaps 3 months before the massacre. I was very young, but I remember because he frightened me. His eyes were cold, and he moved like a predator even in human form. Describe him, Rydian commanded, his full attention fixed on her. Older, perhaps 50 even then. Thin face, gray hair pulled back. He wore robes marked with symbols I did not recognize. Lord Hartley treated him with deference that bordered on fear. Rydian went very still. Symbols. What kind of symbols? Circles within circles, and a wolf's head in profile, but wrong somehow. The proportions were strange. Mage marks, Rydian breathed. You saw a blood mage visiting Lord Hartley? Willa frowned. Blood mages are forbidden. The crown executes anyone caught practicing blood magic. Yes, Rydian agreed grimly, which is why Lord Hartley would have been careful to hide such a connection. Blood magic can do many things that natural shifter magic cannot. It can break wards, enhance strength beyond normal limits, and create curses that persist for years. Understanding crystallized, like the curse that stole my voice. Exactly. Rydian began pacing, his mind clearly racing through implications. If Lord Hartley hired a blood mage to help execute the Silvercrest massacre and silence you afterward, it would explain much. Blood magic leaves traces, but only if you know what to look for. I need to send investigators to Hartley Keep to search for residual magical signatures. He will know you suspect him, Willa warned. Let him know, Rydian said with quiet fury. Let him panic and make mistakes. Guilty men always do. But before he could send investigators, Before they could move forward with the plan, Willa's world shifted again. It happened during a private dinner in Rydian's chambers. They had fallen into the habit of sharing the evening meal, discussing the investigation, and slowly, carefully, learning each other beyond the crisis that had bound them together. Willa had just finished describing another memory, a late-night conversation she had overheard between Lord Hartley and Lady Beatrix about ensuring the Silvercrest matter stayed buried. When Rydian reached across the table and took her hand, the touch sent warmth racing up her arm, the mate bond flaring to life between them. She had grown accustomed to the constant awareness of him, the way her senses attuned to his presence whenever he was near. But this was different. This was deliberate. "You have been remarkably brave," he said quietly. "Not just in throwing yourself in front of that arrow, but in facing memories that would break most people. You deserve to know that I see your strength." Willa stared at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, calloused from sword work and scarred from old battles. "I do not feel strong," she admitted. "I feel like a puzzle missing half its pieces." "Then let me help you find them." His thumb traced small circles on her palm, the gesture unexpectedly intimate. "The bond between us was born of necessity, but it does not have to remain only that. I would like to know you, Willa Silvercrest, not as an investigation or a political tool, but as the woman who chose to save my life when she had every reason not to." Her breath caught. In all the chaos and revelation, she had not allowed herself to think about what the mate bond might mean beyond its immediate practical applications. But now, with his hand warm in hers, and his golden eyes watching her with something that looked dangerously close to tenderness, she could not avoid the question any longer. "Why did you mark me?" she asked. "Truly, it was not just to save my life. You could have let me die and avoided this complication." Rydian was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she had not heard before. "When I saw you fall with that arrow in your shoulder, when I felt your heartbeat weakening, something in me roared that I could not let you die. It was not rational. It was not strategic. It was pure instinct, as if my wolf recognized something in you that my human mind had not yet understood." "And now?" Willa whispered. "What does your human mind understand?" His smile was small and slightly rueful. "That you are remarkable. That you survived 15 years of abuse and emerged with your compassion intact. That you notice things others miss and speak truths others fear to voice. That when you look at me, you see a man rather than a crown." The admission hung between them, vulnerable and honest. Willa realized with a start that this was not merely attraction or the bond's influence. This was genuine affection, carefully offered and waiting for her response. "I do not know how to be what you need," she said finally. "I am learning to speak, to walk without hunching, to exist without apologizing for taking up space. But I do not know how to be a mate to an alpha king." "Then we will learn together," Rydian said simply. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that sent heat spiraling through her. "I do not need perfection, Willa. I need you." The words settled into her chest, warm and steadying. For the first time since awakening in Castle Stormhaven, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not defined by fear or survival. A future where she was not running from her past, but reclaiming it. Where the bond that tied her to this powerful, complicated man was not a cage but a choice. "I would like that," she said softly. His smile transformed his face, chasing away the severity that usually marked his features. "Good," he said, "because I have plans for us, Lady Silvercrest. And they begin with teaching you to shift." Chapter 5. Shadows and Suspicion. The letter arrived 3 weeks after Willa's awakening, delivered by a rider whose horse bore the mud and sweat of hard travel. Counselor Percival brought it to Rydian during the morning council session, his thin face arranged in an expression of concern that did not quite reach his cold gray eyes. "A message from Lord Hartley, Your Majesty," Percival said, placing the sealed parchment on the table with deliberate care. "He expresses worry for the well-being of his ward, the girl Willa. He wishes to know if she survived the attack in the forest and requests permission to visit Castle Stormhaven to ensure her safety." Willa stood behind a carved screen at the edge of the council chamber, positioned where she could observe without being seen. Ridian had insisted she attend these meetings, teaching her the rhythms of court politics and the subtle tells that betrayed a liar's intent. Now, watching Percival's carefully neutral expression, she felt the mate bond thrumming with Ridian's controlled fury. "Lord Hartley's concern is touching," Ridian said, his voice carrying the dangerous calm that preceded violence, "but premature. The girl is recovering and in no condition to receive visitors. You may inform Lord Hartley that she remains under my personal protection." Percival's lips thinned almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Your Majesty. Though I must note that Lord Hartley has legal standing as her guardian. He may petition the High Council for her return if he believes she is being held against her will." "Let him petition." Ridian's golden eyes fixed on Percival with predatory intensity. "I look forward to explaining to the High Council exactly how Lord Hartley treated his ward for 15 years. The whip scars alone should prove illuminating." The tension in the room crystallized into something sharp and brittle. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Percival's expression remained carefully blank, but Willa saw his fingers tighten on the parchment he still held. "I shall convey your message," Percival said, bowing with precise formality before retreating from the chamber. After the council dismissed, Ridian found Willa in the library where she had taken to spending her afternoons. The room was her favorite in the castle. 3 stories of books reaching toward vaulted ceilings, with narrow windows that let in streams of golden afternoon light. "He knows," Willa said without preamble, not looking up from the text on pack law she had been studying. "Lord Hartley knows I am alive and recovering. He will move against us now. I am counting on it." Ridian settled into the chair across from her, his presence filling the space with coiled energy. "Panicked men make mistakes, and I want him to make mistakes. He could claim me legally," Willa said, finally meeting his gaze. "If he petitions the council as my guardian, he will find that difficult when I present you to the High Council as Lady Silvercrest, rightful heir to lands he has been illegally occupying for 15 years. Ridian's smile was sharp as broken glass. "But before that revelation, I need proof of his involvement in your family's massacre. Which is why I am sending investigators to Hartley Keep tomorrow to search for traces of blood magic." Willa's stomach clenched. "That will force his hand." "Yes." Ridian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Which is why tonight we leave Castle Stormhaven." She blinked. "Leave? Why?" "Because Percival is not merely Lord Hartley's messenger. He is his accomplice." Ridian's expression darkened. "I have been watching him for weeks, tracking his movements, monitoring his correspondence. He had access to the dungeons the night the archer was poisoned. He carries messages to and from Hartley Keep with suspicious frequency. And this morning, when he delivered that letter, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. Fear of what? Of me discovering the full extent of the conspiracy." Ridian stood, pacing to the window. "Percival has been my father's advisor before becoming mine. He knows every secret passage in this castle, every vulnerability in my defenses. If I remain here, he will find a way to strike at us. So we remove ourselves from his reach while my investigators do their work." Willa set aside her book, mind racing. "Where will we go?" "To a hunting lodge deep in the northern forests, 3 days' ride from here. It is defensible, isolated, and known only to my most trusted warriors." He turned back to face her. "Lady Beatrix will likely arrive at Castle Stormhaven within the week, claiming concern for you. Let her find the castle empty, and my council tight-lipped about our location. It will drive them to desperation." The plan was sound, strategically ruthless. But something in Willa recoiled at the thought of running. "I am tired of hiding," she said quietly. "I have spent 15 years making myself invisible. I do not want to disappear again." Ridian crossed to her in 3 long strides, kneeling so they were eye to eye. "This is not hiding. This is strategy. We draw them out, make them reveal themselves while gathering the evidence we need to destroy them. You are not disappearing, Willa. You are preparing to emerge." His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing her cheekbones with unexpected gentleness. The mate bond sang between them, warm and insistent. "Trust me," he said. "Please." The word, please. From an alpha king who commanded armies and bent lords to his will, undid something in Willa's chest. She leaned into his touch, letting herself draw strength from his certainty. "I trust you," she whispered. They left that night under cover of darkness, a small party of 6 warriors and 2 healers riding hard toward the northern mountains. Willa had never ridden a horse before, but the mare Rydian selected for her was gentle and sure-footed, responding to the lightest touch. The journey passed in a blur of forest paths and rushing streams, the landscape growing wilder and more rugged as they climbed into the mountains. They slept in shifts, never staying in one place for more than a few hours. Willa learned to move silently through underbrush, to read tracks in mud, to identify the calls of different birds, and she learned Rydian in ways the castle had not permitted. Without the formality of court, without advisors and servants and the weight of ceremony, he became someone different, still powerful, still commanding, but also surprisingly gentle. He showed her which berries were safe to eat, taught her to identify medicinal plants, told her stories of his childhood spent running these same forests. On the 3rd night, as they made camp beside a waterfall that painted the air with mist, Rydian approached her with an expression of determination. "It is time," he said simply. Willa looked up from the fire she had been tending. "Time for what?" "To teach you to shift." Her heart lurched. She had been avoiding this moment, terrified of what it might reveal. What if she could not shift? What if the curse had broken her too deeply for her wolf to emerge? "I do not know if I can," she admitted. "You can." His certainty was absolute. "I have felt your wolf through the bond. She is there, waiting. You simply need to stop being afraid of her." He led her away from the camp, following the waterfall upstream to a small clearing bathed in moonlight. The space felt sacred somehow, untouched by human presence. "Shifting is about surrender," Rydian said, standing in the center of the clearing. "You cannot force it. You must let go of your human form and trust your wolf to take over." "How?" Willa's voice trembled. "Close your eyes. Feel the bond between us. Follow it down into yourself until you find the place where your wolf lives." Willa obeyed, closing her eyes and reaching inward. The mate bond thrummed between them, a golden thread she could almost see in her mind's eye. She followed it down, past conscious thought, past fear and memory, into a deeper place that pulsed with ancient recognition. There. A presence coiled tight in her chest, silver and wild and waiting. "I feel her," Willa breathed. "Good. Now invite her forward. Let her know she is safe." Willa reached toward that silver presence with tentative mental fingers. The wolf stirred, cautious but curious. For so long she had been locked away, suppressed by curse and circumstance. Now, offered freedom, she hesitated at the threshold. "It is all right," Willa whispered aloud. "You can come out now. We are safe." The shift happened all at once. Pain exploded through Willa's body as bones cracked and reformed, muscles tearing and knitting back together in new configurations. She would have screamed if her throat had not been reshaping itself. She collapsed to all fours, gasping through the agony. Then, suddenly, it was over. Willa blinked, and the world had changed. Colors were different, less vivid but with new depths of shadow and light. Scents bombarded her, each one carrying layers of information she had never noticed before. She could smell the mineral tang of the waterfall, the sharp pine of the trees, the warm musk of Rydian standing nearby. She looked down at her paws, silver fur catching moonlight, exactly as the mirror had shown her. A laugh bubbled up, emerging as a soft woof of breath. Rydian shifted beside her, his transformation smooth and controlled. His black wolf was massive, easily twice her size, with those distinctive silver markings on his chest. He lowered his head, touching his nose to hers in a gesture of greeting and approval. They ran together through the forest, Willa's wolf reveling in the freedom of movement, the raw joy of being unleashed after so many years of captivity. Rydian stayed close, guiding her over fallen logs and around dangerous drops, teaching her to trust her new body. When they finally shifted back to human form, dawn was breaking over the mountains. Willa was exhausted, but exhilarated, her body aching in new ways, but her spirit lighter than it had been in years. "That was," she started, then found she had no words. "I know." Rydian said, smiling. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest. Your wolf is beautiful, Willa. Just as I knew she would be. They returned to camp to find one of the warriors waiting with urgent news. A rider had arrived from Castle Stormhaven, not one of theirs, but a messenger who had managed to track their location despite their precautions. The message was brief and devastating. Lady Beatrix had indeed arrived at the castle, accompanied by a contingent of armed guards. But more concerning was the second part of the message. Percival had disappeared from Castle Stormhaven the same night they had left. His chambers had been searched and found empty of personal effects, as though he had planned his departure carefully. He has fled to warn them, Willa said, the realization hitting her like cold water. He knows we are gathering evidence. He has gone to Lord Hartley to help him destroy whatever proof remains. Rydian's expression turned to stone. Then we return to Castle Stormhaven immediately. If Beatrix is there, she will answer for what she did to you. And if Percival has fled to Hartley Keep, my investigators will find him there. But as they broke camp and began the hard ride back, Willa could not shake the feeling that they were already too late. Percival had weeks to plan, to coordinate with Lord Hartley, to set traps they had not anticipated. The game had shifted, and she was no longer certain who held the advantage. Chapter 6. Truth in Ashes. The ride back to Hartley Lands felt different to Willa than the journey away had been. Then, she had been running, retreating to safety, while others did the dangerous work. Now, she rode toward confrontation with her eyes open, and her wolf awake beneath her skin. The forest paths that had once meant escape now felt like roads leading home, not to the home she had lost, but to the closure she desperately needed. They traveled in darkness, a small strike force moving with the kind of silence only shifters could achieve. Rydian led, his black horse moving like a shadow through the trees. Willa rode beside him, her newfound shifting abilities giving her confidence she had never possessed before. Behind them came 6 of Rydian's most trusted warriors, each handpicked for loyalty and skill. Remember the plan, Rydian said quietly as they paused at the forest's edge, Castle Hartley visible in the valley below. Torches burned along its walls, illuminating guards who paced the battlements with more vigilance than usual. We do not engage unless provoked. Our objective is evidence, not vengeance. Willa nodded, though her wolf growled low in her chest, eager for the confrontation she knew was coming. She could smell Hartley Keep from here, stone and iron and old cruelty. The scent triggered memories she had tried to bury, flashes of pain and fear, and endless silence. They will have prepared defenses, one of the warriors murmured. Percival will have warned them we were coming. Good, Rydian said grimly. Let them waste resources on fortifications. We are not laying siege. We are going in through the servants' entrance. The passages Willa knows better than any guard. They descended into the valley under cover of the moonless night, leaving their horses hidden in a copse of trees. Willa led them along paths she had walked countless times while carrying water or firewood, narrow tracks that skirted the main roads, invisible to anyone who did not know to look for them. The postern gate near the kitchens was exactly where Willa remembered, half hidden behind overgrown vines. She pressed her hand against the aged wood, feeling the familiar grain beneath her palm. How many times had she passed through this door as a servant, never imagining she would return as something else entirely. The lock was simple, designed to keep out casual intruders rather than determined wolves. One of Rydian's warriors made short work of it, and they slipped inside one by one, moving through darkened corridors with practiced stealth. Willa's heart hammered as she guided them through the castle's bowels. These passages had been her world for 15 years. The kitchens where she had scrubbed pots until her hands bled, the servants' stairs where she had carried endless loads of laundry and firewood, the narrow corridors where she had made herself invisible to avoid Beatrix's notice. Now she walked them as a stranger, seeing details she had never noticed before. The way moisture seeped through the foundation stones in the eastern wing. The patterns of wear on the floor that revealed which paths saw the most traffic. The faint traces of blood magic residue that glowed subtly in her enhanced vision. Marks left by the mage who had cursed her all those years ago. This way, she whispered, leading them up a spiral staircase that emerged near Lord Hartley's private chambers. His study is through that door. If there are records of what happened to my family, they will be there. Ridian posted guards at both ends of the corridor, then approached the heavy oak door with Willa at his side. It was locked, but this lock was more sophisticated than the postern gate had been. Willa knelt beside it, examining the mechanism with new eyes. I watched him open this door 100 times, she murmured, fingers working at the tumblers. I memorized the pattern without knowing why. 7 clicks left, 3 right, 2 left. The lock opened with a soft snick that sounded deafening in the quiet corridor. Ridian pushed the door open slowly, testing for traps or alarms. When nothing immediately attacked them, they slipped inside. Lord Hartley's study was exactly as Willa remembered. Dark wood paneling, shelves lined with ledgers and legal documents. A massive desk positioned before windows that overlooked the southern fields. The fields that had once belonged to her family. "Start searching," Ridian commanded quietly. "Anything related to Silvercrest, blood magic, or payments made 15 years ago." They worked quickly and methodically, pulling documents from shelves and scanning them by the light of a single candle. Most were mundane: tax records, trade agreements, correspondence about crops and livestock. But then Willa's fingers closed on a leather folder tucked behind a false panel in the desk's lowest drawer. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were letters, some in Lord Hartley's hand, others bearing seals she did not recognize. She read quickly, Ridian looking over her shoulder, both of them growing colder with each line. The massacre had been planned for months. Lord Hartley had hired mercenaries, coordinated with neighboring lords who stood to gain from Silvercrest's fall, and employed a blood mage to ensure no witnesses survived, except one. The letters made clear that keeping Willa alive had been deliberate, a living symbol of Silvercrest's defeat, proof that the bloodline had been safely contained, rather than entirely extinguished. And the muting curse had been Beatrix's idea, implemented to ensure Willa could never testify about what she had seen the night of the attack. "This is everything we need," Ridian breathed, fury and triumph warring in his voice. "With these documents, I can strip Hartley of his titles, reclaim your lands, and execute him for treason." But before Willa could respond, the door slammed open. Lord Oswin Hartley stood in the entrance, flanked by a dozen armed guards. Behind them, Lady Beatrix watched with cold satisfaction, and Percival's thin face twisted into a cruel smile. "Did you truly think I would not anticipate this?" Oswin asked, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of a man who believed he had already won. "Percival warned me of your investigation weeks ago. We have been waiting for you to make exactly this mistake." Ridian's hand went to his sword, but Oswin raised a hand in warning. "I would not recommend violence, Your Majesty. My men have already surrounded your warriors in the corridors. Surrender peacefully, and I will merely hold you for ransom. Resist, and I will be forced to kill the Alpha King in self-defense. I am sure the High Council will understand my position." "You will not live to see the High Council," Ridian said, his voice deadly calm. "You have confessed to murdering an entire pack, to employing forbidden blood magic, to holding the rightful heir to Silvercrest in servitude for 15 years. Even if you kill me, my death will bring every wolf in the kingdom down upon you. Perhaps," Oswin conceded. "But you will be dead, and I will have time to destroy the evidence and disappear. A worthy trade." Willa felt her wolf surging forward, rage and terror mixing into something explosive. She had not come this far, survived this much, only to watch Oswin Hartley escape justice. "You kept me alive as insurance," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "A living monument to your crime. But you made one critical mistake." Oswin's eyes narrowed. "And what was that, girl?" "You assumed I would stay broken." Willa shifted, the transformation rippling through her in a wave of silver light. Her wolf was smaller than Ridian's, smaller than most of the guards. But she was fast and desperate, and filled with 15 years of silenced rage. She launched herself at Oswin, not with the intent to kill, but to create chaos. The documents scattered as she knocked into his chest, claws raking across his shoulder. Guards rushed forward, swords drawn. but Ridian was already moving, his own shift happening between one heartbeat and the next. The study erupted into violence. Ridian's massive black wolf tore through guards with brutal efficiency, while Willa used her agility to stay ahead of blades and grasping hands. She could hear fighting in the corridors, Ridian's warriors engaging Hartley's men in fierce combat. Beatrix screamed orders, but her voice was drowned out by snarls and the clash of steel. Willa caught sight of Percival fleeing toward a hidden passage behind one of the bookshelves. She pursued, her wolf's instincts tracking his scent through the darkness. The passage was narrow and steep, descending into the castle's foundations. Willa pursued Percival through twisting corridors that reeked of old magic and older secrets. Finally, she cornered him in a circular chamber lit by strange phosphorescent markings on the walls. "This is where it happened," Percival said, turning to face her with a dagger in his hand. His eyes were wild, desperate. "This is where the blood mage cursed you. Your parents' blood still stains these stones." Willa shifted back to human form, naked and trembling but unafraid. "Why?" she demanded. "Why help him murder innocents?" "Power," Percival said simply. "Lord Hartley promised me a position on the High Council, promised me influence. All I had to do was help him remove one obstacle." He laughed bitterly. "But you refuse to stay removed, don't you? First surviving when you should have died, then catching the Alpha King's attention, then breaking the curse that should have kept you silent forever. The curse broke because I am stronger than you believed," Willa said. "Because the mate bond shattered your blood magic. Then I will simply have to kill you properly this time." Percival lunged, the dagger aimed at her heart. Willa dodged, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to twist away from the blade. She grabbed his wrist, using leverage she had learned during her training with Ridian, and forced the dagger from his grip. It clattered to the floor between them. They grappled, Percival fighting with the desperation of a cornered rat. But Willa was younger, stronger, and fueled by righteous fury. She slammed him against the wall, holding him there with supernatural strength. "You will answer for what you did," she hissed. "Every crime, every life you helped destroy. You will face justice." Footsteps echoed in the passage behind her. Ridian emerged, now in human form, blood streaking his chest from wounds already healing. "The guards have surrendered," he said. "Oswin and Beatrix are in custody," his golden eyes fixed on Percival. "And now we have the last conspirator." They dragged Percival back to the study, where Oswin knelt with hands bound, his shoulder bleeding from Willa's attack. Beatrix stood rigid and silent, her face drained of color. The documents lay scattered across the floor, irrefutable evidence of their crimes. "Lord Oswin Hartley," Ridian said formally, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority. "Lady Beatrix Hartley, Counselor Percival, you are all charged with high treason, conspiracy to commit murder, employment of forbidden blood magic, and crimes against the realm. You will be transported to Castle Stormhaven to face trial before the High Council." Oswin's expression twisted with impotent rage. "You think this changes anything? I am a lord of the realm. The council will never execute me on the word of a servant girl." "They will execute you on the strength of your own written confession," Ridian corrected coldly, gathering the scattered documents. "Every payment, every plan, documented in your own hand. You were meticulous in your record-keeping, Lord Hartley. It will be your undoing." Willa stood silent, watching the man who had stolen her childhood, her voice, her family. She waited for satisfaction, for the sweet taste of revenge, but all she felt was emptiness and exhaustion. Ridian noticed her stillness and moved to her side, wrapping a cloak around her bare shoulders. "Are you hurt?" he asked quietly. "No," Willa whispered. "I am just tired. So tired of carrying this weight." "Then let it go," Ridian said gently. "Let justice carry the weight now. Your part in this is done." As dawn broke over Castle Hartley, Ridian's warriors secured the prisoners and began cataloging evidence. Willa stood in the courtyard where she had once scrubbed flagstones and hauled water, watching servants emerge cautiously from their quarters. Marin was among them, eyes wide with shock and hope. "Willa?" she breathed. "Is it true? Are they really arrested?" Willa found her voice. Her real voice, clear and strong. "It is true," You are free, Marin. All of you are free. The servants began to weep, some with relief, others with disbelief. Willa moved among them, speaking words of reassurance, promising that their lives would change for the better. She was no longer one of them, but she would never forget what it meant to be powerless and afraid. Rydian watched from the castle steps, pride and something deeper warming his expression. When Willa finally returned to his side, he took her hand. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Willa looked back at Castle Hartley one last time, then forward toward the road to Stormhaven. "Yes," she said. "I am ready." Chapter 7. The Claiming Under Moonlight. 2 weeks after the arrests, Castle Stormhaven prepared for a ceremony that had not been seen in generations. The full moon hung heavy in the sky, casting silver light across the courtyard where wolves from every corner of the kingdom had gathered to witness the formal claiming of the Alpha King and his mate. News of the arrests had run ahead of the prisoners themselves. By the time Hartley, Beatrix, and Councillor Percival reached Stormhaven under heavy guard, the High Council was already convening to weigh their crimes against every law they had sworn to uphold. Willa stood in the chambers that had become hers, staring at her reflection in the polished mirror. The woman looking back was almost unrecognizable from the silent servant who had once scrubbed floors at Hartley Keep. Her hair, now washed and brushed until it shone, fell in dark waves past her shoulders. The gown she wore was simple but elegant, deep green silk that matched her eyes, cut to allow easy movement should she need to shift. Counselor Edith adjusted the clasp at Willa's shoulder, her expression soft with approval. "You look every inch a Luna," she said quietly. "Your mother would have been proud." The mention of her mother sent a pang through Willa's chest. She had spent the last 2 weeks learning about her family, reading journals and letters that had been preserved in the royal archives. Her mother had been gentle and wise, her father strong and just. They had ruled Silvercrest with compassion, treating even the lowest Omega with dignity. "I wish they could be here," Willa whispered. "They are," Edith replied, touching Willa's hand gently. "In every choice you make, in every kindness you show, you carry their legacy forward." A knock at the door interrupted them. Rydian entered, and Willa's breath caught. He wore ceremonial armor, black leather embossed with silver wolves, a cloak of midnight blue falling from his shoulders. His beard was freshly trimmed, his hair pulled back to reveal the strong lines of his face. But it was his eyes that held her, golden and warm, looking at her as though she was the only person in the world. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. Willa nodded, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I am nervous," she admitted. "What if I do something wrong? What if they do not accept me?" Rydian crossed to her, taking both her hands in his. "You have already proven yourself 10 times over. You risked your life to save mine. You faced your abusers with courage. You reclaimed your birthright. Any wolf who does not accept you is a fool. But I was a servant," Willa said, voicing the fear that had haunted her for weeks. "I cannot read pack law as well as I should. I still stumble over formal speech. I am not. You are exactly who you need to be," Rydian interrupted gently, "and I will be beside you every step of the way." He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing kisses to her knuckles. "Tonight is not just about duty or politics. Tonight is about us. About choosing each other freely. Not because fate or necessity forced our hands, but because we want to." His words settled something in Willa's chest. She remembered the desperate claiming in the forest, the emergency bond forged to save her life. That had been survival. This was different. This was choice. "I choose you," she said simply. "Not because you are the Alpha King, but because you see me. All of me, including the broken parts. And you do not turn away." Rydian's expression softened into something that looked dangerously close to tenderness. "Then let us go make it official." The ceremony took place in the forest clearing where Willa had first learned to shift. Torches ringed the space, their flames dancing in the night breeze. Wolves lined the perimeter, alphas and betas from every pack in the kingdom, their eyes reflecting torchlight as they watched in respectful silence. At the center of the clearing stood the High Priestess, an ancient Omega whose white hair fell to her waist and whose eyes held the wisdom of centuries. She wore robes marked with the symbols of the old gods, and her voice when she spoke carried power that made the air itself seem to hum. "We gather under the full moon to witness a claiming," she intoned. "Not a claiming born of desperation, but one chosen freely under the eyes of our ancestors and the blessing of the moon herself." Willa and Rydian stepped forward together, hands clasped. The mate bond between them thrummed with anticipation, warm and steady. "Willa Silvercrest," the High Priestess said, turning to her first. "Do you accept Rydian Stormborn as your mate, your alpha, your chosen companion for as long as both shall live? Do you promise to stand beside him in times of peace and war, to challenge him when he falters, and to support him when he stumbles?" Willa's voice rang clear and strong. "I do. Rydian Stormborn," the priestess continued. "Do you accept Willa Silvercrest as your mate, your Luna, your equal partner in all things? Do you promise to protect her, to honor her counsel, and to never silence the voice she fought so hard to reclaim?" "I do," Rydian said, his golden eyes never leaving Willa's face. "Then by the power granted to me by Moon and Pack, I invite you to complete your bond. Run together as wolves, hunt as one, and return to us as mates bound for life." They shifted together, the transformation happening in perfect synchronicity. Willa's silver wolf and Rydian's black one stood side by side for a moment, their eyes meeting in wordless understanding. Then they ran. The forest opened before them, paths illuminated by moonlight that seemed brighter than natural. They raced through ancient trees and over rushing streams, their wolves moving in harmony. Willa felt the bond between them growing stronger with every stride, weaving their souls together in ways that transcended words or thought. They hunted together, bringing down a deer through coordinated effort, Rydian driving it toward where Willa waited, her smaller size allowing her to dart in and finish the kill cleanly. It was primal and perfect, their wolves understanding each other on a level their human minds could not fully grasp. When they finally returned to the clearing, the moon had reached its zenith. They shifted back to human form, breathing hard, their skin flushed with exertion and something deeper. The assembled wolves waited in respectful silence as the High Priestess approached with a ceremonial blade. "The final marking," she said, offering the blade to Rydian. "Not done in desperation or necessity, but in choice and celebration." Rydian took the blade and made a shallow cut across his palm. Blood welled, dark in the moonlight. He offered his hand to Willa, who did the same, her blood mixing with his as they clasped hands. "Blood to blood," the priestess intoned, "soul to soul. What the moon has blessed, let no wolf tear asunder." Then Rydian leaned in, his teeth finding the mark he had left on Willa's neck weeks before. This time there was no pain, only pleasure as he renewed the claim with deliberate care. When he pulled back, Willa did the same, marking him for the first time on the base of his throat, where everyone would see it. The bond flared between them, golden and unbreakable. Willa gasped as power flooded through her. Not just Rydian's strength, but something else. Her Omega abilities, dormant for so long, awakened fully. She could feel the emotions of every wolf in the clearing, sense their loyalty and their doubts, their hopes and their fears. More than that, she could influence them. Calm aggression with a thought, inspire confidence with a glance. The assembled wolves dropped to one knee in unison, heads bowed in respect, not just to their Alpha King, but to their new Luna. "Rise," Rydian commanded, his voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. "Rise and welcome Lady Willa Silvercrest, Luna of Stormhaven, rightful heir to Silvercrest lands, and my chosen mate." They rose as one, voices lifting in a howl that echoed through the forest and up to the moon itself. The sound was primal and beautiful, a symphony of wolves acknowledging their new leader. The celebration that followed lasted until dawn. Wolves shifted between forms freely, running through the forest or gathering around bonfires to share stories and ale. Willa found herself surrounded by well-wishers, alphas who had once seemed intimidating now bowing and offering gifts. A carved wolf pendant, a bundle of rare herbs, a promise of alliance. But it was the quieter moments that meant the most. Myron appeared, no longer a kitchen servant, but free to pursue the healing art she had always dreamed of studying. "Thank you," she whispered. embracing Willa fiercely, for showing us that even the broken can become whole. Near midnight, Rydian pulled Willa away from the celebration, leading her deeper into the forest to a place where the trees grew so thick they blocked out all sound from the outside world. "I need to say something," he said, his hands framing her face with unexpected gentleness. "Something I should have said weeks ago." "What is it?" Willa asked, her heart racing. "I love you." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of absolute truth. Not because of the bond, though the bond is part of it. Not because you are Luna, or because of your bloodline. I love you because you are brave and kind and stubborn. Because you chose to save my life when you had every reason not to. Because when I look at you, I see home. Tears pricked Willa's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I started loving you the first time you defended me in the Great Hall. The first time someone saw me as worthy of protection rather than punishment." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, the mate bond singing between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Rydian pressed his lips to her brow in a quiet, wordless promise. "Come with me," he said. "There is one more thing I need to show you." He led her to a small stone structure hidden in a grove of ancient oaks. Inside, illuminated by soft magical light, were books and scrolls and artifacts bearing the Silvercrest crest. "I had my historians recover everything they could find," Rydian explained. "Every record, every heirloom, every piece of your family's history. It is not much, but it is yours." Willa moved through the collection with trembling hands, touching journals written in her mother's flowing script, running her fingers over the silver wolf pendant her father had worn. Here was proof that she had come from somewhere, that she belonged to a legacy of honor and strength. "Thank you," she breathed, "for giving me back my past. You gave me a future," Rydian replied simply. It seemed only fair. They stayed there until the first hints of dawn painted the sky pink and gold, reading through journals and sharing memories. His of a childhood spent learning to rule. Hers slowly returning as the curse's last shadows lifted from her mind. They spoke of plans for the future, of rebuilding Castle Silvercrest as a haven for displaced Omegas, of reforming laws that had allowed corruption to flourish. When they finally returned to the clearing, the celebration had quieted into contentment. Wolves dozed in piles around dying fires, sated and happy. Edith waited near the edge of the trees, a knowing smile on her face. "Ready to face your first day as Luna?" she asked Willa. Willa looked at Rydian, at the wolves who had accepted her, at the future stretching before them bright with possibility. She thought of the girl she had been. Silent, afraid, convinced she was worthless. That girl was gone. Transformed not by magic or claiming, but by the simple act of choosing to be brave. "Yes," she said firmly. "I am ready." Chapter 8. The New Luna. 3 months had passed since the claiming ceremony, and Castle Stormhaven had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. Willa stood on the eastern balcony overlooking the training grounds, watching young Omegas practice defensive formations under the supervision of her newly appointed guard captain. The sight filled her with quiet satisfaction. Oswin Hartley, Beatrix, and Counselor Percival had already faced judgment in Stormhaven's Great Hall. Their titles stripped, their estates seized, and their sentences carried out beneath the same law they had twisted for years. The morning air carried the scent of autumn, crisp leaves and wood smoke from the kitchen fires. Below, the courtyard bustled with activity. Warriors drilled with swords and shields while servants moved between buildings carrying supplies for the day's work. But the atmosphere was different now. Servants walked with straighter backs, their voices raised without fear. Warriors treated them with respect rather than contempt. "Your reforms are working," Rydian said, joining her at the railing. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her against his side in a gesture that had become familiar and comfortable over the past months. The High Council received another petition yesterday, Lord Blackwater requesting permission to implement similar training programs for Omegas in his territory. Willa smiled, leaning into his warmth. "That makes 6 lords who have requested guidance. The old ways are changing, because you are showing them a better path." Rydian pressed a kiss to her temple. "The Alpha Assembly begins in 2 hours. Are you ready?" Willa's stomach tightened with familiar nervousness. The Assembly of Alphas was the kingdom's highest governing body, where territorial disputes were settled and new laws were proposed. This would be her first time addressing them formally as Luna, presenting the reforms she had spent months developing. "As ready as I will ever be," she said. The assembly hall was an imposing space, high vaulted ceilings supported by columns carved to resemble ancient trees, their branches spreading overhead in stone. Alphas from every territory filled the tiered seating, their eyes tracking Willa and Rydian as they entered. Some faces were friendly, others skeptical, but all showed respect. Willa wore formal robes in Silvercrest silver and Stormhaven blue, the colors representing the union of their houses. At her throat, the claiming mark was visible. Rydian's bite transformed into an elegant scar that marked her as his mate and equal. "My lords," Rydian began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber, "we gather today to address matters of law, territory, and the future of our kingdom. But first, Luna Willa wishes to speak regarding proposed reforms to our treatment of Omegas and servant classes." Willa stepped forward, heart hammering, but voice steady. She had practiced this speech with Edith for weeks, refining every word until it carried both conviction and diplomacy. "My lords, I stand before you not merely as Luna of Stormhaven, but as one who lived 15 years in servitude. I know what it means to be powerless, to have no voice, to exist at the mercy of those who see you as less than worthy of basic dignity." She paused, letting her words sink in. Several alphas shifted uncomfortably, perhaps remembering their own treatment of servants. "I propose 3 reforms," Willa continued. "First, that all Omegas, regardless of birth or circumstance, be granted the right to education and training in self-defense. Second, that servant abuse be recognized as a crime punishable under pack law, with victims granted the right to testify before councils. Third, that positions of authority, including council seats, be open to qualified Omegas and Betas, not reserved exclusively for Alphas." A murmur ran through the assembly. Lord Blackwater rose, his expression thoughtful. "Lady Willa, I mean no disrespect, but these reforms would fundamentally alter centuries of tradition. What guarantee do we have that weakening Alpha authority will not lead to chaos?" "I do not propose weakening Alpha authority," Willa replied calmly. "I propose strengthening it through justice. An Alpha who rules through fear and oppression is weak. True strength lies in earning loyalty through fair treatment and wisdom." She gestured to Rydian, who stood watching with quiet pride. The Alpha King could rule through force alone. No wolf in this kingdom could stand against him. Yet he chooses to govern through law and counsel. That is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. Another Alpha stood. "Lady Thornfield, ruler of the Western Mountains. The Luna speaks wisely. My own territory has begun implementing similar reforms, and I have seen nothing but improvement. Servants work harder when treated fairly. Omegas who receive training become valuable assets rather than liabilities. These changes benefit all wolves, not just the powerless." The debate continued for over an hour, with arguments raised and countered on both sides. But slowly, grudgingly, consensus formed. The reforms would be implemented on a trial basis, with each territory granted flexibility in how they applied the new laws. When the vote was finally called, it passed with a clear majority. Willa felt tears prick her eyes as the assembly formally recognized the reforms. This was what she had fought for, not vengeance against those who had hurt her, but lasting change that would prevent others from suffering as she had. After the assembly dismissed, several Alphas approached to offer congratulations or ask questions about implementation. Willa answered each with patience, drawing on both her experience and the knowledge Edith had helped her accumulate. But it was the young Omega who waited until the hall had nearly emptied who touched Willa's heart most deeply. "Lady Luna," the girl said, bowing low. She could not have been more than 16, with nervous eyes and hands that trembled. "I wanted to thank you. My Alpha heard your speech and has agreed to let me train as a healer. Before today, I thought I would spend my life cleaning kitchens and hoping not to be noticed." Willa took the girl's hands, squeezing gently. "What is your name?" "Lysa, my lady." "Lysa, you owe me no thanks. You deserve the opportunity to use your gifts." Promise me you will work hard and become the finest healer your territory has ever seen." The girl's eyes shone with determination. "I promise, my lady. I will make you proud." After Lissa left, Willa found herself alone in the hall with Rydian. He approached slowly, his expression unreadable. "You were magnificent," he said finally. "I have seen battle-hardened alphas crumble under the pressure of addressing the assembly, yet you stood before them and changed the course of history with nothing but truth and conviction." "I was terrified," Willa admitted. "I know." He pulled her close, resting his chin atop her head. "But you did it anyway. That is what courage means." They stood together in the empty hall, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. Willa thought about the journey that had brought them here. From the forest clearing where she had taken an arrow meant for him, to this moment where they stood together as partners in every sense. "There is something I need to tell you," Willa said quietly. Rydian pulled back to look at her, concern flickering across his features. "What is it?" "I am with child." For a moment, Rydian simply stared at her, his expression frozen in shock. Then joy broke across his face like sunrise, transforming him into someone younger and more carefree than she had ever seen. "Truly?" he breathed. Willa nodded, placing his hand over her stomach where new life grew. "The healer confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to wait until after the assembly to tell you, so you would not be distracted." Rydian laughed, the sound rich and full of wonder. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she was dizzy and laughing with him. "A child," he said, setting her down but keeping her close. "Our child, an heir to both Silvercrest and Stormhaven. Are you pleased?" Willa asked, though she could feel his joy through the bond. "Pleased does not begin to describe it." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing her cheekbones with infinite gentleness. "You have given me everything, Willa. Purpose, partnership, hope for a future I never allowed myself to imagine. And now this. How could I be anything but overjoyed?" They returned to their chambers to find Edith waiting with a knowing smile. "I assume you told him?" she asked Willa. "How did you know?" Willa asked. "I have been midwife to 3 generations of royals," Edith replied. "I know the signs. Besides, you have been glowing for weeks." She approached, embracing Willa warmly. "Congratulations, my dear. You will be a wonderful mother." The news spread through the castle like wildfire. By evening, the great hall had been prepared for an impromptu celebration. Wolves from across the kingdom, who had remained after the assembly gathered to toast the Luna and the coming heir. Willa moved through the celebration in a haze of happiness, accepting congratulations and well wishes from nobles and servants alike. But it was the moment when she saw Marin, now apprenticed to the castle's master healer, that emotion overwhelmed her. "You are going to be a mother," Marin said, tears streaming down her face. "After everything you survived, everything you overcame, you get this joy. It is what you deserve." "We both survived," Willa reminded her, "and we both get to build new lives. You will be the finest healer in the kingdom, Marin. I know it." Late that night, after the celebration had finally quieted, Willa and Rydian stood on the balcony overlooking Silvercrest lands. Construction had begun on the new castle. Not a replacement for what had been destroyed, but something new. A sanctuary for displaced Omegas. A school for young wolves regardless of rank. A symbol of the future they were building together. "What are you thinking?" Rydian asked, his arms wrapped around her from behind, hands resting protectively over her stomach. "That I am happy," Willa said simply. "For the first time in my memory, I am truly, completely happy. I have you, I have purpose, I have our child growing inside me, and I have hope for tomorrow." "You have more than that," Rydian said softly. "You have the love and respect of an entire kingdom. You have proven that strength comes in many forms, and that the voiceless can speak loudest when finally given the chance." Willa turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had saved her life, and then helped her reclaim it. "I love you," she said. "Not because fate bound us together, but because you choose to be my partner every day. Because you see me not as a broken servant or a political tool, but as your equal." "You are my equal," Rydian said firmly, "in every way that matters." and I will spend the rest of my life ensuring the entire kingdom knows it." They kissed under the stars, the mate bond singing between them, two souls bound by choice rather than necessity. Below them, Castle Stormhaven settled into peaceful sleep, its people safe and cared for under the rule of an Alpha King and Luna, who led with both strength and compassion. And far to the south, in the ruins of Castle Silvercrest where new foundations were being laid, silver wolves howled their welcome to the moon. The bloodline had not ended in tragedy after all. It was being reborn in hope, carried forward by a woman who had survived silence to find her voice, who had endured darkness to claim her light. Willa placed her hand over her stomach, feeling the flutter of life within. This child would grow up knowing love and security, would never be silenced or made to feel worthless, would inherit not just lands and titles, but the legacy of a mother who had transformed suffering into strength, and a father who ruled with wisdom tempered by mercy. The future stretched before them bright with possibility, and for the first time in her life, Willa was not afraid to face it. The end.